Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. I'm Bria Baker, and with me, as always, is my insanely brilliant and beautiful co-host, Jamira Burley. Today, we're talking about Trump's occupation of D.C. and the way that the National Guard is being deployed to militarize and surveil Black and Brown residents.
Yeah, Trump has truly turned DC into a war zone and in the name of quote unquote public safety. Of course, we are the ones who bear the blunt of that violence. For the last 2 weeks, tanks, soldiers, police officers have swarmed the streets of DC and all but shut down the city to enable folks to move throughout freely as they rightfully should under the Constitution. This shows a force that has escalated to insane heights, and we're going to talk about it. But first, let's get into the headlines.
Yes, I mean, there's a lot going on in DC. So my first headline is about Lisa Cook, a Black woman who's been serving on the board of governors for the Federal Reserve since 2022. She was appointed by Biden. President Trump is trying to fire her. And he doesn't really have the power to do that unless he can prove that she has been bad at her job. The justification he's giving is that she lied on some mortgage paperwork, which not only feels really like a reach, but also is something they've done before. We've seen this with District Attorney Marilyn Cosby, I believe, and a few other prominent Black women that they come after, Stacey Abrams, like they come after them for really niche tax and mortgage paperwork when they can't find any dirt on them to get them out otherwise. Marilyn Mosby, forgive me. And so I'm really confused about what's going on with this. People are outraged. She has support from other Federal Reserve board members, and she's actually suing and saying, I'm not stepping down, and you're going to have to pull me out of there, drag me out of there, kicking and screaming. So it looks like this might go all the way to the Supreme Court. But we know that Trump has a majority there, so that's not the best of news to hear. And it seems like this is all some big ploy because Trump wants to nominate his own Federal Reserve board members to be able to slash interest rates and do a lot of moving things around. And for those unfamiliar, the Federal Reserve is our nation's bank. So
it's supposed to be seen as an independent agency that is removed from the current influence or the heavy influence of a particular government or administration for that matter, which is why many of them are appointed for longer terms that oftentimes overlap with a Republican and Democrat presidency. And to your point, Trump doesn't have the authority to remove her unless there's cause, which is why they're trying to make up cause. And for a man who constantly lies about the status of his wealth, a man who himself is convicted of a number of crimes, have lied on forms, and have defrauded the American government, I find it very ironic that he's now trying to say she lied or misrepresented herself on a mortgage application, which is pretty ironic because I would assume that that's something that was vetted long before she was appointed.
Right.
She is the first Black woman to be appointed to the Federal Reserve. So we all know that Black women are rarely just given positions. It's oftentimes they are overqualified for them. So I would find it hard to believe that Biden, regardless of his flaws, would appoint someone who had the potential to be under this type of scrutiny.
That part. So yeah, it just feels like part of his continued DEI woke witch hunt to take down Black people in positions of power and to assert that he's going to replace them with white men who will do his bidding. And I'm just really glad to see people standing up and speaking out, considering there are so many things for us to be angry about.
Yeah, like the FBI lowering its standards to allow for more recruits after they fired hundreds, if not thousands, of highly qualified federal agents are now facing a shortage and a lack of people who are more than qualified, who can meet the current standards of the FBI to apply, because many people don't want to be attached to this regime. And so sources are confirming that instead of spending 18 weeks in training at the academy in Virginia, the agents tentatively will only be scheduled for about 8 weeks. So they have reduced the 18 weeks to 8 weeks. And for an officer who has the potential to carry a firearm, it's really scary to think that this is where they see the cuts. And let's remember, this is an administration that tried to slash DEI and is still trying to slash DEI all around the country because they're claiming that minorities are getting jobs when they're underqualified. But we know who is really underqualified in this country. But
hello, clock that T. Yeah, I also think, we've had this conversation of the fact that law enforcement at all levels of tenure and leadership are already undertrained and need to be doing more. They're enforcers of a law. They don't ever have to sit in like a law school and actually study that law in a deep way. So to slash that already hesitant amount of training in less than half is wild.
Absolutely wild, because to your point, like, these are folks who are supposed to enforce the law, more importantly, protect the state, right? By utilizing the law as a form to protect the state. And in doing so, we've seen many officers get in verbal altercations with citizens where they claim that something is illegal. Turns out that it's not. And so I don't know how it's ever been okay for a police officer or an FBI agent or a CIA agent who does not have any sort of legal degree to accompany them actually enforcing the law, the way lawyers do, the way doctors do, the way people who actually are highly skilled individuals and not just people, walking around town feeling like a big man with a gun. And let me just say, if you're a member of this Trump's FBI and ICE, you are definitely a person that is not desirable in any sort of way. And, especially if you're a person of color, if you are leading this charge, thinking that you are a part of the system, it's only a matter of time before they come for you too.
Yeah. But it also just keeps going back to what you mentioned at the top, which is that they had people in these positions and they pushed them out.
Yep.
And now, so it's like, so Doge wasn't as efficient as it seemed, because now you're having to make up for this deficit and this loss that you created. Like, this deficit did not exist prior to January 2025.
Absolutely. The Trump is notorious for creating chaos where chaos didn't exist, i.e. what's happening in DC.
Period. That part. Well, speaking of chaos, this is not a Trump action necessarily, but I do think it also speaks to attacks on Black people in leadership, Black businesses, Black people in power. Fawn Weaver, CEO of Uncle Nearest, the beloved whiskey liquor company, has been a part of this really odd lawsuit. I will be honest and say I am not a business expert. So as this was all going down, I really had to dig in and try and understand what was happening. But essentially, as all businesses do, the company Uncle Nearest borrowed some money. The creditor is saying that Uncle Nearest defaulted on that loan. Uncle Nearest is saying we had a CFO who wasn't doing what they were supposed to do, but we do have money. We do have collateral. We, can make this happen. Let's get on a payment plan. And still, in spite of that, in spite of their transparency and their cooperation, a court has appointed a receivership and is essentially like stripping Fawn Weaver and her team of power in the name of paying back this creditor. Now, what I have learned from people who are more intimately connected to like the business side of things is that typically a receivership, it's almost like a conservatorship or a guardianship that we've seen with like famous people like a Britney Spears or Wendy Williams, and that things have to get really, really bad for the court to appoint someone to step in and take control of the finances. And one unpaid creditor does not make typically this sort of situation. So it just feels like a takedown, a shakedown, many things. Fawn Weaver was put under a gag order, but she has been subtly referencing the lawsuit in different appearances that she's been making, including most recently at InvestFest here in Atlanta. But it's just really devastating because you see us assume these positions and build something. Uncle Nearest is a legacy brand, and its whole like ethos is Uncle Nearest, who they're named after, taught Jack Daniels everything he knew. Yeah. So Jack Daniels could be such a profitable American brand. Uncle Nearest should be, because that's the real Black man behind the recipe. And so the fact that that legacy is being attacked and tainted, it feels like really, really like sore in that way. And again, it's coming at a time when a lot of Black businesses are under attack, Black nonprofits, Black people in high places. So it's this feels like we take 3 steps forward and, we're dragged 20 steps back.
Absolutely. And I think the two of the things that really stood out for me around the announcement of the conservatorship.
The receivership is for,
Receivership is the way people were automatically assuming that she was a bad business person, right? Like the automate response from the vast majority of people on social media was that she was a bad business person and that she clearly shouldn't be leading the business. And I was curious how so many, especially men within our society, are able to fail up, right? They get so many chances to try and ideate and develop. And even if everything we've read about the creditors is true, that doesn't automatically mean that she is a bad business person or that she should not be leading her company, a company that she started from the ground up, right? Through blood, sweat, and tears. And the second thing that I noticed was the fact that she felt the need to come out and defend herself, especially to people who look like her, who was almost like gleefully excited that she was facing this level of. I saw so many people who did not give real examples on like Threads and Twitter make these references that she wasn't a nice person. And it reminded me of how oftentimes Black women who are assertive, who shows up prepared, who comes in polished, are oftentimes seen as intimidating. And because they don't give people who approach them in public the energy or the time, therefore they're labeled as being combative or like mean. And it was really frustrating because some people will say to me like, oh, Jamira wasn't nice because I didn't smile at them. And I think that's just so bizarre that we put this pressure on Black women to always accommodate the responses of individuals, and if not, then or accommodate these niceties when we engage with people. Otherwise we're labeled as just being mean or rude or bitch, all of those things, because we're not nice. We don't smile enough. We don't give people give people opportunities even when we don't have to give. It was pretty frustrating watching that, but I hope her all the best that she's able to figure this out. Yeah, to your point, one creditor shouldn't automatically mean that she should be out of having control of her business. And the bank, I think, probably overreached. And I'm curious to see what the courts will say as she continue to fight this battle.
Yeah, same. I know she's been pushing people to clear those shells though. So there's been a lot of community support. And I think that's always important for us to show, is that we're not ever going to beat the capitalist game. It's not designed for us to beat it. But through community, through genuine support of one another, I think we can really show that we have brands that have staying power. So
no, absolutely. And for the last final headline, I hate these headlines and they're becoming more frequent than not. But 2 children were killed and 17 were injured in a shooting in Minneapolis at a Catholic school mosque. This is a school that I believe that serves K through 8th graders. We're talking about babies. Unfortunately, were the victims of a mass shooting that was done. The shooting has now been identified as Robin Westman, who shared a manifesto on social media. The police are still investigating that manifesto. I haven't had the chance to read it, but it's really disheartening to hear that children who were praying in church, who were just starting their first week of school, had to face this type of violence unnecessarily, because this country continues to put the interests of firearm companies over the interests of the general public. And you can't even go into a school or a movie theater or a restaurant without fearing that might be your faith, because of the over accessibility of guns and the lack of regulation. And we're just handing guns to anyone, depending on where you are in the state. So it was a real sad story to wake up to yesterday.
Oh my God. Yeah. Especially because I believe the 2 people who have already been pronounced dead were an 8 and 10-year-old. They were already interviewing a 5th grader directly after the shooting, who described one of his classmates saved his life by shielding him with his own body, and was in the hospital in critical condition because he had gotten hit while trying to save his friend. And so it's just that kids are having to make these decisions of how to save myself, how to save my friends. Also, this same child that was doing this interview described, like, we do drills every month. So he knew what to do, and still it doesn't. So the drills are not stopping things. Police are not stopping this. We just need to get these weapons out of the hands of people. And, it's always a very specific group of person who are behind these shootings. Another white person who got their hands on a large amount of weaponry and ammunition. We need more digital security, because the manifestos, it wasn't like the manifesto was posted and 1 minute later Robin Westman walks into the building. And so it's like, how are we not combing the internet better to find these things and stop before it happens? Because they can shut down our posts for music copyright like that. They can shut down social media. It just feels like so little is being done that would actually be effective. And we keep holding on to the same things. Give the kids drills, give the kids, bulletproof whatever. And it's like
bullet book bag. I've seen those. Yeah. We're preparing children for war zones versus for just existing and living their lives in a country that's supposed to be free, in a country that's supposed to, be different than other places. And we continue to show that we are, we too fall victim to the institutions that are oftentimes run by a capitalist society who sees money and greed as more important than the lives of babies.
And we are different than other places in a bad way. We're the only country that deals with mass shootings in this way. Everyone else has found a way to learn from those moments and curb the violence. And we just, as you said, it keeps becoming more and more frequent. So really scary times. Really scary times.
Yeah, especially for, especially for parents out there who are sending their kids to school. But we're going to take a quick break. You are watching On the Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change. We just finished unpacking some really harrowing and hard headlines, but now it's time to talk about another really hard and harrowing headline, which is what's happening in our nation's capital, the way that people who live, work, and study there are being affected, and how what we're witnessing is truly just the beginning.
No, that's so true. Because Trump has now announced plans to deploy the National Guard to Chicago, Baltimore, New York, and other cities, which just happen to be homes to some of the largest populations of Black and Brown people. Mm-hmm. Trump has been painting these cities as crime-ridden and in the need of cleanup through brutal force, which is just the justification to use his power, overreaching power in those cities with police and soldiers. Coincidence? I think not, especially when many of those cities not only have a large Black and brown population, but are oftentimes run by Black legislators. And it's no surprise. This feels like a reminiscence of the war on drugs that plagued our cities for decades, and people are still dealing with the repercussions of those policies.
That's such a real comparison. And also, these are some major attacks on the unhoused, which is insane to come in the midst of an economic crisis that Trump has created and exacerbated. He's led rampant layoffs on a federal level, tariffs that are directly affecting consumers. And so all of this is making it so much harder for the average American to be on top of anything like their finances, their debt to income ratio, remaining in housing. And so it's insane to say the least. Let's break down what is happening, though, over the last few weeks, because nearly 1,000 National Guard troops and about 500 federal officers from 18 different agencies have been reassigned and deployed in D.C. as a part of this authoritarian takeover. Again, this crackdown comes at a time when Trump is saying that D.C. is crime-ridden, and so that's what this is all about. It's in the name of law and order and public safety. Again, really reminiscent of the war on drugs. But what's fascinating is that violent crime in D.C. has actually been on the decline. So none of this is data-backed.
No, that is totally true. DC actually has dropped in the last 2 years, I think about around 26% on the decline since last year alone, which is, the decline is the decline is representative of the fact that the income inequality that exists within DC, right? DC is home to one of the largest unhoused population nationwide, and the military takeover is leading to more people being homeless and facing scrutiny if they have encampment, and they're facing violent slashes of their property. Poor people are just really being pushed out of sight and out of mind. And I want to remind folks that, more people are going to be unemployed by the simple fact that Trump has made slashes to the federal government. More people are going to be unemployed because you simply have an economy that is not doing well for the vast majority of Americans, and thousands of people are being laid off every single month in this country. 300,000 Black women were laid off. So rather than addressing the root causes, which is keeping Americans on the decline and destitute, the conditions in DC and in other cities, Trump is leading into really his racism that has always existed, and his classism attacks on people that oftentimes leave those who are already vulnerable in marginalized positions, and even people with criminal records that will really impact the trajectory of their lives for years to come if we don't correct this.
Yeah, it's definitely, this is more than just a moment. It really is going to follow people. This week alone, I believe there was a day when 140 people were arraigned in DC in one day. Court had to be in session until 1 a.m. to deal with the backlog. So this is definitely giving a mass incarceration campaign. He's locking up any and everyone who's out on the streets without a so-called reason, which is like, what is this? Like the black codes and like DC residents don't want this. DC residents don't want to be put under a curfew and military, martial law. But Trump doesn't care. It was never truly about what DC residents want or need or what makes them feel safe. It's always been about his vision for America, and he's starting in DC, and it's going to continue to spill out to other cities that he's cleaning up or making white again.
Yeah, and as someone who previously worked in police reform, and I've sat on 2 police oversight commissions, one in Philadelphia and the other in DC, I can tell you that more police has never been shown to decrease crime. Like, it oftentimes is the reason why crime is escalated in many communities. And it's not just DC residents that are facing this, right? And they are speaking up. You also had the DC Attorney General agree that these actions are unprecedented, unnecessary, and unlawful. Continue on the rhetoric that we know about is that there is no crime emergency in DC. The mayor held a press conference recently saying that she greatly appreciated the surge of officers, but the majority of DC residents disagree with her and have been very vocal and outraged with their outrage. Seeing her press conference, I was really disgusted.
I'm like, what?
So she was like, no, crime is on the decline. This is unnecessary. And now all of a sudden she's complying. She's always been compliant in advance, but now she's complying blatantly. And because of that, she is putting DC residents at risk. They are telling the National Guard members in DC to carry a firearm. Why?
Right.
Why? Why would
Right.
you do that? And it's only going to take one instance where they are going to use that as the bedrock to continue to push this kind of rhetoric. I mean, we saw just one incident where someone named Big Balls, who was a member of Doge, was quote unquote attacked. And that led to him continuing this siege on Black communities and Black neighborhoods.
Yeah, I was also really confused and shocked by that with her. I'm like, I don't know if she recognizes, like what you said, that these attacks seem to be all on cities that are Black led, and she's trying to cozy up to hopefully stunt. I don't know what her strategy is, but it's not one that DC residents agree with. She needs to stand with her people. And continue to reiterate, there is no crime emergency. And actually, the only crime emergency in DC is the one behind the ivory walls of the White House. So ironically, there have been some shots because, again, the National Guard is being deployed. You have thousands of soldiers and police officers in DC that were not there 2 weeks ago. And some of them have nothing to do. So much so that there have been videos and photos of some of these National Guard members picking up trash around Lafayette Park and outside of the White House. So, I mean, I'm like the metaphors are being said themselves. That like there's no real epidemic of crime for them to address outside of what every major city in the US deals with, every major city in the world deals with. And so I think to label these cities as having unique crime issues is so false and very much a racist and classist attack.
Yeah, and I will say watching National Guard members pick up trash would be slightly funny if it wasn't impacting our community so much. Right? In addition to the show of physical force, Trump is now planning to drop and has dropped some executive orders that threatens to end cash bond bails, which has been law since 1992, to establish a specialized National Guard unit that maintains order. Sounds very Putin-like. Prosecute protesters who desecrate the American flag, which, according to the Constitution, is our right. And yeah, we're just seeing him look for any way and every way to draw attention from the real issues of violence in this country, like mass shootings, and the fact that he is under scrutiny by his entire base around the Epstein files, and he is using these moments as an opportunity to distract from the real issues and the real accountabilities, because God forbid he actually shows some level of transparency in his administration.
Say that, because yeah, no National Guard is being sent to Minneapolis to deal with mass shooting. No National Guard members were sent to the city where two elected officials were assassinated by someone impersonating a police officer. We have hurricanes hitting various parts of this country. No National Guard members are being sent there to make sure that people are being evacuated safely. So the actual spaces where there really are crises are being ignored in the name of this like created sense of urgency, that and a fabricated sense of urgency that just does not exist. And so much for freedom of speech. You know, I always think it's so interesting that Trump and his cronies, who claim to be the freedom of speech people, are constantly putting out these executive orders and these calls for policing and prosecuting people for their right to protest. When the Supreme Court affirmed back in 1989 that burning or otherwise destroying the nation's flag, while offensive, is protected as free speech, but Trump is looking to circumvent all of that with threats of mandatory minimums of 1 year in jail for any destruction of the American flag. So this is Fascism 101. It's our job to be informed, to take action, to refuse to comply in advance, to not do what Mayor Bowser is saying, and to really reiterate, like, this is not working for us. This is not what we want. This is not helping anyone. That young Black and brown kids are going to be affected most, and that we got to get shit together.
No, absolutely. And reminding everyone that these are litmus tests, testing us, seeing how much we are willing to accept as he continues to do his overreach in broad daylight, which is why we need to continue to amplify the voices of those on the ground and look to calls for action to help us advocate for those communities, even if we don't live in them ourselves. You're watching The Other Side of Change only on the Black Star Network, and we'll be right back. Alone.
hatred on the streets. A horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
We are back at the other side of change, only on the Black Star Network. We still want to dig deeper into this topic of the DC crackdown and Trump's deployment of the National Guard, all the ways that it's actually making people feel more unsafe than what he proclaims to be doing. We have a clip that we want to show you, and then we're going to talk more about it, as well as some statements that have been released by local DC organizers. Let's take a look.
And the Metro Police Department confirms there hasn't been a murder here in Washington since August 13th. Now the president's taking it a step further, seeking $2 billion from Congress to clean up the nation's capital.
Mayor Bowser better get her act straight or she won't be mayor very long, because we'll take it over with the federal government running like it's supposed to be run.
Almost 2,000 National Guard soldiers are now patrolling D.C. And on Friday, the Pentagon announced Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has authorized them to carry weapons if their mission requires it. But Democrats argue it's not a long-term strategy to reduce crime.
It has international purposes in wartime, but it also has domestic purposes. And that tends to be, in states like mine, helping out with fires, helping out with floods. My answer is help fund the police and the local control of the police and not use the military in this way.
The White House says Guard members are protecting federal assets and providing a safe environment for law enforcement to make arrests. And President Trump has indicated this crackdown effort could be coming to other parts of the country.
Whew, child. I think those visuals are so important for people to see, because it can sound like, oh, well, he's sending police in and there's supposed to be tanks in the middle of the street, soldiers in camo walking through the parks right next to kids. Like, the visuals are stark. I think you used this term earlier, Jamira. It's a war zone. And it's just alarming to see this happen in a time where it's so not needed. And there are times where we do need greater protection and it just doesn't show up. And we are left feeling more vulnerable and we don't get the protection that we do deserve. It's too much.
It's too much. And it's very reminiscent of formerly, when I used to work for Amnesty International, we were a part of the human rights observation that took place in Baltimore during the Baltimore uprising due to the police killing of Freddie Gray. And I remember walking the streets of Baltimore when there were tanks on the street. And even then, it felt like an overreach, right? An overreach of a public response to having the ability, the rightful ability within our Constitution to exercise our right to protest, freedom of speech, right? And to now see that almost explosion of that same thing happening in other cities across the country when there is not these massive protests happening right now, at least not the way in which Trump is labeling them. It shows that they're trying to get us used to this, right? Like they're trying to make feel very, very normal, and nothing about this is normal. Tanks on American soil is not normal. Troops being deployed against American citizens is not only not normal, but it is illegal. It is against the Constitution. Our troops are not supposed to be inflicting violence against its own citizens, which brings to mind a TikTok that I saw, and I'm curious if you saw it. There is a TikTok of a young woman that basically said, we would not be in this situation if men were actually as dominant as they pretend to be. Because the vast majority of soldiers are men, the vast majority of police officers are men, and yet they are so willing to take orders, even orders that might be against their own moral compass, even orders that might be illegal. They still are taking these orders and implementing these orders and carrying out these orders despite the fact that they, quote unquote, are these manly, masculine men, and yet they are so easy to fall victim to, a beta perspective, as folks were saying on the internet. And yeah, it's mind boggling. I'm not surprised by any of this, right? Like, are we really surprised? This is what Vice President Kamala alluded to during the campaign trail that Trump would do, was that he would send troops to our communities. This is what Trump alluded that he would do, right? When he saw what he did his first term, putting military forces around the White House, pushing for police to physically harm protesters who were exercising their constitutional rights. And yeah, I'm not surprised. But what is surprising is that this is the same man that said he could not call the National Guard on the January 6th insurrectioners. And yet he has the authority to call the National Guard on more than 19 states. It doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense.
None of it makes sense.
Trying to overthrow the federal government, like people who were trying to, Trump is that guy, man. He's going to do what he said he was going to do. And we are the ones who, too many people are the ones that didn't believe him. And now they're seeing the repercussions of that.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought up the insurrectionists, because those are people who were armed, who stormed the Capitol, who were attacking law enforcement, which again, this is the party that claims to not only stand with the troops, but to back the blue. And nothing. Right. Law and order, everything. They had nothing to say and no real accountability or punishment for those rioters. And then for, that's like treason. That's an attempted coup. Meanwhile, citizens who are unarmed, civilians who are not engaging in any sort of violent protest of any kind, are being attacked in the name of public safety and what is needed to come after these unarmed civilians are these big rolling tanks. And it's just as you said, it really
a movie, right? It's something that you see happening outside of the US but it's a reminder, eventually these tactics that we allow to be implemented around the world will come home to roost. Like American imperialism will come home to eat our faces. And we're seeing that in real time, which is why, the NAACP put out a statement regarding Trump's takeover that was flanked by a statement or a comment or a quote by the president of the NAACP, Derek Johnson, as well as the president of the DC chapter. President Derek Johnson said, the brave men and women who are making up the National Guard are our country's defense against domestic emergencies and national disasters, not weapons against American citizens. Deploying the National Guard in this way will not only disgrace our troops, but also a waste of taxpayer dollars. And it's built on a lie. This is an administration that, quote unquote, said that they were going to reduce federal waste. And we are watching hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on a lie that could be going to actually support people getting off the street, people getting access to jobs, people getting being retrained for the workforce, us actually making our community safer and prettier. But instead, we are seeing the military state that we have created through providing military armory and guns to our police officers being now weaponized against us. And we said this was going to happen, right? We said this was going to happen through the many protests and many advocates over the last decade. And now we're seeing it play out in real time.
Yeah. Yeah, you hit that right on the head. But again, organizers are not backing down, though this was avoidable. And though this was avoidable and we shouldn't be in this position. They are still fighting back. There's an Instagram page at Free DC Project. The Free DC movement actually existed long before this moment, just to really advocate for the rights of DC residents, knowing what was going to happen on the other side of this election. And so they have put out their own statements saying, remember what works. Those strategies being: do not obey in advance, prioritize joy, take up space, be in solidarity, and organize. Lean on your neighbors and your community members. And I think that that's so critical. They have also mentioned that they just want to be really visible about Free DC, that DC is currently being occupied, and to continue to use that language, because what we're not going to do is lean into the narrative that this is being done on behalf of DC residents. It's being perpetrated against DC residents. And so that's really critical. And again, they also put out a statement around Mayor Bowser's remarks and said 80% of DC opposes Trump's control over the police. The overwhelming majority of DC residents oppose what's happening right now, and they want a mayor and an administration that's not going to violate their constitutional rights, disappear their neighbors, or treat children like criminals. Their demand remains the same: all escalated federal forces out now. And I couldn't agree more. I think that that's absolutely what we need. Get the National Guard out of DC and keep them from entering into other cities as well. We can't afford this sort of crackdown to happen across the nation. What we really need is protection against these mass shootings. What we really need is enforcement of climate change law. COP 30 is around the corner. Like, what we actually need is for our president to be focused on real epidemics that we're facing, not these fabricated ones.
Couldn't agree more, which is why this conversation is not the end, but the beginning, as we continue to keep you all updated as these stories developed, and also, continue to see how Trump continues to use his fascist regime to impede on the civil and human rights of all of us. So the conversation continues on, and we will continue to keep you updated. With that being said, you are watching On the Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. As always, keep pushing, keep fighting, and we'll see you back next time.